Welcome back to Clinical Psychology Community UK. My name is Holly and I'm currently a first year trainee clinical psychologist in the UK. Today I'm going to be giving you an overview of how I prepared for my DClin site interviews the year that I was successful, so last year, 2021. And I just want to say this was a requested video by our Instagram followers, so make sure you follow us on Instagram. I do loads of Q&As and hopefully some helpful posts about applications and interviews and what it's like being a trainee at the moment. And I tend to do posts like stories every day, kind of showing what the day is like, so you get a bit of a feel for what it's like to be a trainee at the moment. I've also done a video on top tips for DClin interviews before, which I'll make sure I link down below. Hopefully it's got loads of different, it's kind of my definitive list of all the top things that I would suggest people do before an interview. So let's get into it. So in 2021, I was offered an interview, a reserve place for an interview, and 2 rejections at the application stage. That was my kind of outcome. And the reserve place for an interview did turn into an interview, so I did have 2 interviews. After my first interview, I was on the reserve list for a place, and the day before the deadline was offered a place. Amazingly, did not think that was going to happen. And then from my second interview, I was not successful on reserves or getting a place. So that's my background from that year, just so I think sometimes it can look like everyone gets 4 offers and 4 interviews and 4 places, and that's just not always how it goes. It certainly isn't what happened for me. So my successful year, I had 2 rejections at the application stage and 2 interviews, so you never know what's going to happen. So the 2 interviews for me were around 6 weeks apart. So for a lot of this stuff that I'm going to talk about, I kind of focused on each interview at a time. So I think as well, I'd had my first interview before I found out that I was going to have a second interview at the second course. So it was easy. I just had one in my mind. I was like, I've got one to focus on. So I focused very much on that. And then when I found out I got the second one, focused on that. So I basically started looking at the courses, which I'll come on to in a minute. I will just say though that this is my experience. This is what I did to prepare, and some people might be like, no, that isn't what I would do to prepare, and that's not what I did when I was successful, and that's absolutely fine. We all have different ways of preparing for things. So some of these things will work for you, some might not, some might, it's not gospel what I did. It just happened to work for me. So let's start with the courses. For me, it was really important that the course knew that I knew what I was talking about with the course. So it was really important to know about the course that you're being interviewed for. And I know that might sound really, really obvious, but it's important to be able to link that course ethos to you. So how I started going through the clearinghouse page for the course and their course and the sort of DClin page on their website, writing down some of the key points about their ethos, about what I liked about the course, what I thought I might struggle with about the course, but ultimately why I wanted to study at that course. And for me, the 2 lists were quite similar, like what I liked about the course and what I wanted to study on that course for. As I had already done this at the application stage, but it was interesting kind of comparing those lists as well. So firstly, for me, my course that I was successful in getting a place on, clinical health psychology was a focus. And I think that is really important. It's something that I have always worked in. It's something that I want to continue to work in. So that focus was probably my top reason. Secondly, systemic was a secondary therapeutic model, which, we all have to do CBT, which is fine for what it's good for. And I wanted to do systemic as a second, so that kind of helped. I also liked the support that the course seemed to offer. They seemed to really be behind trainees and offer a lot of different support. Fourthly, the assignments seemed useful and relevant, so particularly the service projects, and I do detail each of those projects within my last video about placements on the DClin, so have a little look about that. I'll link that down below. And then fifthly, location. Location was okay. It wasn't ideal, but it was okay, and that's one of the reasons I applied for it anyway. But that was important really for me to have those lists. And having this in mind kind of helped me be honest in the interview when answering questions. My desire to study at the course came through. That was what I was told in the feedback anyway. So I think it's a really important thing to start with the course and linking it to you, because it really does come across in the interview. So why do you want to be a clinical psychologist? That is a really important question for me to be able to consider an answer. And I think if you have an answer that is truthful to this question, it comes across throughout the interview. I think sometimes, for me, this is my experience anyway, after applying 6 times, by the 4th time I was like, am I just going through the motions? Like, why do I want to be a psychologist? Like, what are the things that I want to do? Or am I just like, I kind of had a bit of an existential crisis. I was like, I don't actually know why. And then the 2 years succeeding that, so the 5th application, the 6th application, I was like, actually no, these are the reasons that I want to be a psychologist. These are the reasons that I want to do the DClin as opposed to counselling or health. These are the reasons. And I kind of got that. But I think it's important to really understand why, and not just be because I want to get onto the course. Because if it is just I want to get onto the course and I want to do the thing that no one said I could do, that is, that is still a reason for me. That was a reason, but it's not the thing that's going to help you succeed on training, like, ultimately. Again, this is something I had done when I was applying, so thinking really, why do I want to be a psychologist? But something about having the interview made it seem more real, like these answers actually were real, and I was going to have to explain to someone like why I wanted to study on their course, perhaps. Like, it changed some of the answers, and it kind of changed my experience a little bit. But I tried to ask myself these sorts of questions and have answers to them. Like, as you might be able to tell, my prep was very much like spending time on my own with some music and a candle and some tea, and just writing things down, like questions, and thinking about things, because I am quite like tactile. Like, I like to write things down and see it. So this is why lots of those techniques are helpful for me. So I asked myself these questions: which aspects of training am I really looking forward to? And so for me, placement, delivering therapy, working with service users was really important. Doing the service improvement work, because that's one of the 3 main kind of projects. And I was really looking forward to doing that, I think. Also, I was really looking forward to the teaching, because, I've always loved being at school, as nerdy as that is. I've always loved it. I've always loved being in lectures and like learning stuff. I found it really exciting. So I was looking forward to doing that. And I think also, it's not so much of a big reason, I guess, but I was really looking forward to calling myself a trainee clinical psychologist. It's been years of me like trying to do this, and finally we're here. So yeah, I think those were some of the things that I was really looking forward to. And then I asked myself, which aspects of training are you nervous about? And firstly, imposter syndrome, massively, i.e. not feeling like I was supposed to be there, not feeling good enough, all of those sorts of things. I knew that would be a really big challenge for me, and getting to know 30 odd other people who are brilliant, who deserve their place, who probably feel the same as me, like feel, oh, I don't deserve to be here, and look at everyone, they're so brilliant. But that is something that I knew was going to be hard. I also thought about everyone I'd spoken to about the course staff, trainees, qualified staff, said that it is going to be hectic and it's a lot of things to juggle. And so I thought, okay, how am I going to organise my time? Like, what aspects? I am nervous about that, and juggling all these different things, as well as like living your own life. Like, think life carries on. People get married, people buy houses, all of this stuff happens while you're on the course, because the course is a job. Like, it's really important to kind of think about it like that, I think. Anyway, so I asked myself, which aspects of training I was nervous about. I also asked myself, at this moment, what sort of psychologist do I want to be? And I think at this moment is important, because that changes. The person that you wanted to be when you were 5 years old is probably different to the person you wanted to be at 15 and 25 and 35. So I think it's no different with your career. I think the sort of professional you want to be probably changes. But so at that moment, what sort of psychologist did I want to be? And I knew things like compassionate, person-centered, all those sorts of terms definitely came up. And I also knew that I wanted to make a difference. So I wanted to work with marginalized communities, and I think mental health communities often are, but particularly as well physical health communities, people with long-term conditions. And we are seeing more and more of that, and I think that is going to hopefully be meaningful, and that is actually really important to me. And I think something about this kind of ties into values. So what do you value, and what sort of psychologist do you want to be adherent to those values? So for me, it was helping people live as healthy a life as possible, because I don't always think that we're taught how to do that physically, mentally, emotionally. I don't think we're taught how to be healthy in schools. It should happen, but I don't think it does. And I think it's really important to be able to help people adjust to living with long-term conditions, living with mental health issues, traumas. That is something that was really important to me. So I knew that I wanted that to come across in the interview. And then I asked myself, which aspects of being a clinical psychologist are particularly exciting to me. So when I'm qualified, which bits am I, really going to make me want to get out of bed in the morning and go to work? Definitely therapy. Like, I know that therapy is massive. I also know that in the context of the NHS, clinical psychologists tend to take up leadership positions within teams. And I know that that is probably where I will be expected to go, and actually where I want to go eventually. When I have the experience and the knowledge and all of the things that I need to have, when I have all of that, then I can hopefully get there. And I think that was important as well, not just thinking of it like, oh, I need to get past this interview, or I need to get past training. It's, what do you want to be in the future? Because training is very much the start of that. It's not the end point. And it can often feel like the end point when you've gone through all the years of, study and work that you have. Training feels like a result, and it is, but it's just a component in that journey. So I think having those answers to those questions, for me, it made me excited about the interview and the opportunity that I had within the interview, rather than filling me with complete dread and panic like I'd had previous years. The dread and panic was still there, but it wasn't quite so much. And I think these actually made me think, I think I am feeling a bit ready for this. Like, this is the year that I feel really ready for it. And I'm not saying that everyone does feel ready, because that isn't always the experience that people have either. But for me, that was my experience. The next thing I want to talk about is your expectations of training. So this is something that I thought about, which was advice from current trainees as well as qualified staff. They were like, really think about what training is, what your expectations are, and kind of how you're going to manage those things, which kind of comes back to the questions I asked myself about what I expected from training. But these particular ones were important, I think. So this was based on conversations I've had with trainees, as I said, and qualified staff, but as well the psychology, Instagram, social media, YouTube community, particularly the Worry People and the Oxford Psych, were massively helpful in kind of understanding a bit about what trainee life is. These things came to my mind, particularly the work and juggling lots of different things. And in the talk for our course, they said it was a 50% clinical, 50% research, and 50% academic degree. Clearly adds up to 150%, which is highly stressful. And now I'm on the course. Yes, it is highly stressful. There are lots of different things to consider, and I've done a few videos. I've done a week in the life of a trainee that I'll also link down below, as well as my placements on the DClin, so that hopefully gives you a bit of an insight into what training is like. I also expected to feel the imposter syndrome and the need to fight it. I've already spoken a little bit about that, but I think it's important, just what do you expect training to be? It's important to understand what you think training is going to be and how you're going to navigate some of that, have a bit of a plan in place. There might be questions about how you're going to manage your well-being. There might be, but essentially think about the interview as they're assessing how you're going to manage with training, with all of the different demands of training, and understanding how you're going to manage those things is an important part of the prep for me. So now we come to my experience, and this, I think it's really easy. Some people might want to start with this, but for me, I wanted to have a foundation of what the course entailed, what my expectations of training were, because that was the lens that I needed to look at my experience through, so I could take that to training and say, oh yes, here's a case example of someone that I worked with, and these are the things that I've learned from it, and this is why I'm more prepared for this course. All of that stuff is really important. So for example, the clinical health psychology aspect of things, I've always worked in clinical health psychology, and I have a good understanding of where psychologists sit within MDTs. There are different roles that psychologists can play in those teams, and also how they support staff as well as patients and service users and families as well. So, and that then linked to, this is why I think this course is a really good place for me, blah blah blah. So I started to think about each job that I'd had, and I went through them kind of with different lenses, thinking about which experiences and skills would be useful for the course and for life as a psychologist as well, not just training, but beyond. I also thought about kind of eras of my personal life that I've now come to kind of see as life chapters, and just thinking about my personal experience and actually how some of this fits into the course, and what I'll bring to the course, because those experiences are super important and you can't get rid of those. They make me who I am as well, and you will most likely bring that stuff to teaching and to placement. It's important to be aware of that stuff. So the three sort of rough areas that I looked at clinical. So in each of the jobs and the kind of areas of my life, I suppose, I chose, I think it was 3 cases that showed a few different competencies, skills, experiences that were relevant to training and relevant to that course. So things like teamwork, some of the challenges that I experienced, some of the mistakes that I made, how I overcame those, how I learned from those, using supervision, managing risk, all of those sorts of things. I tried to think just of 3 because, yes, you could think of a case example for each competency that you're supposed to kind of be showing, but I can't remember all of that. And I think it's better to have 3 that hit a few different points that you might be able to fit into any answers than anything else. Although this didn't really come up that much in my interview, I have to say that this really wasn't much of a focus for my interview. It was far more on other stuff, which I might come to. Then I looked at the research element of things, which is something that I am generally quite scared of, continuing to this day to be a little bit scared of it. I reviewed my master's dissertation, mainly because my undergrad dissertation wasn't very good. So I used my master's dissertation to be able to kind of talk about it succinctly in sufficient detail and link it to kind of wider psychology. So I talked about what I did, how I did it, who was involved, and what that means in terms of dissemination in the wider literature. Was it congruent with some of the other findings? Actually, did it oppose some of the other literature? Just thinking about where it stands, it's that next bit that they're really interested in. They want you to be researchers. They want you to be able to go out competently and lead research, or certainly contribute to it. So it's an important part, particularly for me for that course. That was an important part that I wanted to think about. I also did the same with an audit project that I'd done as an assistant psychologist, because it kind of linked to the service improvement project on training. So I think those are important things to really think about. I also think with research, I looked up a recent paper that had been published in the area that I was working in, so older adult mental health. I kind of looked at a recent paper, had a little look through it, kind of critiqued it a little bit, and looked at a few of the other wider literature, the NICE guidelines, and looked at that sort of thing. So if I was asked about a recent research paper, that I would be able to talk about it, because I know that research was a big thing for that course. So yeah, I'd recommend doing that as well. And then general stuff. So organisation, how I've organised my time before, how I organise my time now, how am I going to do all of these things? And then something about resilience, I guess, like how am I going to manage my well-being and managing the imposter syndrome? How's the travel going to affect me? How is it going to be being in a room full of 30 amazing people as well as amazing core staff, and how are you going to manage all of that? The big change from being kind of a pre-qualified, pre-training person to being on training. As well as reviewing my clinical cases, I also looked at 2 psychotherapeutic approaches. and models to ensure that I could kind of apply them to different situations. So the ones I chose were CBT and CFT, compassion focused therapy. And I actually did use CFT in one of my interview answers. And that was made, and I liked the fact that I had two prepared, because the CBT one I was floundering over a little bit, and I thought, I'm not feeling completely confident about applying this in this situation, so I'm going to use this one. So I think it's important to have two. That was really helpful for me anyway. So one of the things that I tried to do was explain both models to my partner and my parents and my family and my friends, just to see if they kind of understood it, because if they didn't, it meant that I really needed to keep practicing, because it's important to be able to talk about these concepts as if people don't understand, like people from not psychology backgrounds can understand. Moving on to reflection then, I used reflective models for quite a few months before, and it really helped me understand myself in a really different way. I've spoken about this quite a lot on this channel, and I will put the links down for different reflective model videos that I've done. I also can provide templates. If you want to drop me an email, I'll pop that down in the description below. I can send you the templates, but the videos go through each of the models, so you can make your own templates from that. That's exactly what I did. I just made them on Word based on the different models that I'd read about and seen. So yes, I would definitely use some reflective models to really help you understand your experiences, like applying them to those few cases that you've prepared. Really thinking, okay, what could I have done differently? How do my social graces come into this? If you don't know what social graces are, I will pop the video down below. We have done a video covering those as well. And realistically, on reflection, this channel helped me massively, like hugely. I was at a point where I was like, I'm never going to get past the interview. I'm just never going to be able to get past that. And I know that I can do it. I know that I could do training. So confident back then. I know that I could do training, but I just can't get past the interview. And I think doing this has been so helpful, like particularly doing the live webinar stuff, because you get used to hearing your own voice, because that's quite daunting actually. Just hearing yourself speak for 5 minutes is quite a lot. Like it's a lot. So realistically, I think this YouTube channel and Instagram really helped me, because it helped me find a bit more of a voice. And I'd encourage anyone to do the same. So some of the practical things that I did to prepare them, let's think about those things. So I went through the email invite, so I had a really clear idea of what the interview would look like. So it also had a kind of clinical video task that was delivered online as well. There wasn't loads of information given about that, but I made sure I knew what time it was. I made sure that I, had everything prepared, that I had the internet sorted out, so I could plug in the internet rather than using Wi-Fi, and I just had all of that stuff kind of prepared. Same for the interview. I'd made sure my space was tidy, and I just practically did all of those things. So I think that is important. I had a candle, I had my favorite drink, like my favorite soft drink, I hasten to add. So just doing those things to kind of give you that sense of comfort in a quite stressful situation typically. I also compiled a massive list of questions that I had either experienced in interviews or kind of tweaked them. I made questions up, and I just wrote a list of them. And I also kind of wrote some points to answers. But one of the things that I did is I recorded myself answering questions, and I tried not to be prepared for what the question was going to be. So what I did is I hit record on my camera, and then I went to the list of questions. I scrolled up and down and pointed, and I found one, and I read it out, and I acted as if it were an interview. So I wrote down the key points of the question. I took my time, and I spoke the answer. Again, just hearing yourself for 5 minutes is quite different when you're not used to it, and I think that sometimes can get in your head when you're in an interview, because you can think, oh my god, I'm talking too much, or my voice sounds shaky, or I'm not using the right words, or blah 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 blah, and it can be quite a lot. So I recorded myself, and I have archived those recordings. I have not seen them, but it did really help, like to just formulate those words and listen to your own voice. Thirdly, I treated myself before and after the interview, and also tried to maintain like a bit of a balance before the interview and in the interview prep. So previous years I had like revised and done loads of reading. Every spare minute that I had was reading and revising and writing notes, and this actually wasn't helpful. like for me at all. So I took time out to do fun things. Like I'm a massive Formula One fan, so I made sure that with my family I would sit and I would watch the Formula One, because that is a big thing for me. I would do that on a Sunday when I should be preparing. But just taking the time out to be with family, to be with friends, to just chill, because that's important. And that's really important for the course, to be able to do those things. I wondered if it would be useful to think about what I would tell myself now if it were a year ago, because I think it was a year to the day actually that my interview was. So my interview last year, I'm pretty sure, was on the 29th of March, which has just dawned on me actually that it's been exactly a year. How strange. What would I tell myself now? Honestly, there are two bits of advice that I would give myself that I probably didn't know a year ago. Lots of it, I would say, yeah, that seemed to work. Like, well done. And I think that's one of the reasons that I wanted to do this video, to be like, yeah, actually, these were the things that worked for me. So honestly, I would say everyone gives different answers to the questions, and that's okay. And I know that from speaking to people on my cohort. Like, I remember on the first day we were like, oh, what did you say to this interview question, and what did you say to this? And the answers were so vastly different because we're all from different backgrounds. So it was really interesting and soothing actually to say, do you know what, I answered it this way, and everyone was like, oh, that's interesting. And then someone else would say, oh, well, I did this, and we'd be like, oh, I never thought of it that way. And that is really lovely. And also that the questions, I think you would struggle to revise for the questions. Like, they really design the questions around kind of seeing how you approach things and testing your kind of skills, rather than, you know, can you recite to me cognitive behavioral therapy and the theory behind it? It's not about that as such. They're testing your knowledge in other ways, I think. And secondly, it's okay to say I don't know. I think this is a huge one, because I think a lot of the time when we're pre-qualified and in the interview, we just want to show that we know what we're talking about and we're good enough to be here. And I don't want to say I don't know, because then they'll think that I'm an idiot. And it's so easy to fall down that rabbit hole. And that's exactly what I did in my first two interviews. So 2019 and 2020. This year, I did say that in an interview. I was like, oh, I don't know. Let me have a think about that. And was like, I'm just going to take a few seconds just to really think about that before I give you an answer. And I think the panel seemed to appreciate that. I don't know. I know that a lot of other people in my cohort did the same thing. And that's okay. I think it takes some confidence to be able to say, I actually don't know. Just give me a sec. Or I really don't know how to answer that. But if that situation did come up, then this is what I would do, you know, or whatever it is. I think it shows tremendous confidence. And I think that is one of the things that they're looking for, actually. They want people that have something about them that says, do you know what, I feel comfortable enough to say that I don't know, because we're not going to know things on training. That is the point. And we're going to have to say, oh, I don't really know how to do this. I don't know how to approach this. I don't know what to do in this session. I don't know how to do this. And it's important to be able to communicate that. So I think that is something that I would tell myself now as well. Well, huge good luck if you have got an interview this year, any other year that you might be seeing this video. Massive good luck to you. Please remember to take a breath, to just remember that you deserve to be there. And it might be that you're not quite ready yet, and that's fine. But every time you do an interview, you will get more experienced and you will know what to expect in future interviews. And I know that's really hard to hear, because when someone would tell me that after my first interview, I'd be like, yeah, fine, but I want a place. So it's really easy to get there. I get it completely. Also, check out that interview top tips video. It's got lots of other helpful kind of bits in there that other people have said have been helpful, and other things that I found helpful as well. And make sure you follow us on Instagram. Lots of our Instagram suggestions from followers become videos like this one. So I'm really always so keen to hear what you think, what you want to see. I'm here to kind of provide some of the things that are useful, hopefully. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.